I'm really excited to be staying on the stage and present my info. To know more about me, visit present info section of the site. And briefly, I could say that I'm a web platform developer at Altoros company and have expertise in web services and web platforms, and recently focused on mobile development. And we started this research named cross-platform tools. Build once and run anywhere. It's a metaphor. So let's go to the slide. Here is our action plan for today. We will review current mobile platforms that are available today on the market, maybe the most popular. Then I will group all the tools that we have been reviewed during research into main groups, so we can find any common things and advantages, disadvantages. Example of usage, it's basically I will show you how code looks like. It will be just a screenshot, the screenshot of IDE if it has. And the summary, of course, this is what you're waiting for, the summary for this research. And the questions, if you have anyone, feel free. So, this is how the current, I would say, the most famous platforms, mobile platforms available for today. So this is Android, which mostly occupied by 60% of all worldwide smartphone sales, according to the first quarter of 2012. And then it will be iOS, which about 25–4%. I would say that Android has a lot of devices. That's why it's taking so big share, and unless that iOS have only 5. Then it comes Symbian, Research in Motion with BlackBerry, and Windows Phone 7. Nothing special, it doesn't fit in a pipe. That's why it's the top. So, I would say that many manufacturers produced many devices for these widely used platforms. And of course, one of the ideas is to have a tool that allows you to come to every platform and have ability to run only one code and write one code base, less bugs. So this is what everybody is waiting from across platform tools, and see does it help. So this is main groups according to our research. I didn't say that this is some official groups. This is how we decided to divide all tools that we have been reviewed. So this is like 5 main categories. JavaScript libraries, which present Accenture, Joe, it's another application framework, jQuery mobile. So from the title you understand it is JavaScript libraries that you can embed into your project. Wrappers around the web applications is basically presented by Mobile on Ruby, PhoneGap, which was a previous presentation, and Mosync, it's a C++ used as a main language to develop application. The categories that I've added recently is transformers to native code. This is Antenna, doesn't have name, and Accelerated Titanium. The one common thing that they produce the native code for a native SDK. One and single maybe that I have been reviewed is application framework, which basically starts the cross-platform development from the scratch. So we'll talk about it. And I have added Adobe Air because we have another developer who was responsible for creating a cross-platform tools or applications on Adobe Flex. JavaScript libraries, the first category, the world famous tools. What common about all these JavaScript libraries according to the cross-platforms? They all provide single unified graphical user interface. It means that all these tools that I have been talking about, Accenture, jQuery, Mobile, Joe, they provide an interface, a single interface, which will be the same if you run on a web, on an iPad, Android, iPhone, or any web having browsing capability device. And in some cases it's a good study, in some cases it's a good choice, because you don't have to teach your customer every time to get used to native interface on different platforms. So most of these JavaScript libraries have a touch interface benefits, so they use a touch gesture. Of course, many devices have a touch screens. And all these JavaScript libraries based on new HTML5, which could allow you to play video and audio without Flash Player and have a storage with some issues and provide you animation and effects with a CSS3. So here is an example of one tool, Sencha. It's, I would say that I heard about Sencha like 3 years ago, and it was first version, was really slow. It's provided, at that time, it provided like iPhone style interface for buttons, tabs, forms, input elements. Right now, they have like a version number 2, and let's say it's mostly you write your code on a JavaScript with a little bit HTML there, and it's converted. So I would say for me, these tools, it's too much JavaScript. It's too much definitions that I need to follow in order to write an app. It's like, I need to define controllers, I need to define views, I need to define models. For me, it comes all from Xcode, and it's come from native SDKs, like principles of dividing, principles of coding the application. And I think it's not sometimes convenient, because either way you have to learn this all from the native SDK and start to use. They have some additional products related. It's Sencha Architect. It's basically UI builder. And this is one of the indicators for me is that you have to write a lot of JavaScript. To build single UI window is like some 10, 15 lines of JavaScript code just to display the window, and it's hell. That's why I decided to build UI builder. It's native macOS application, and it helps you like to prototype your UI view. Also, they have Sencha animation. For me, it was familiar action script builder. So you could define your CSS animation, and as a result, you will get a CSS style in JavaScript. So perfectly to use. Another one, jQuery model. I would say another famous tool. And in this case, if you, on Sencha, you provide a lot of JavaScript, here you provide a lot of HTML tags with additional properties. And again, for me, it becomes a challenge. I have to remember all these special properties of HTML tags that I need to define. Let's say I want to have a header, I want to have a list. I need to define data row list view. And again, so there is not a lot of JavaScript running to build an app, but a lot of HTML to know how to name this or that tag. So they also have a rapid prototype tool named Koja. Support platforms, any web browser, with some limitations, of course. It's not like ideal to work on all web browsers. Another one, Joe. Interesting, when we started this research like 3 or 4 months ago, it was a popular tool to build a UI interface for your applications. But since then, there is no commits to this GitHub repository. So I would say it's like, maybe it's dying, because there is another huge tools like jQuery Mobile, as I presented below. But this tools is lightware. It's about 11 kilobytes of the code. Also provide, as you can see on the window, some special UI style. It's not an Android style, and it's not an iPhone style. Some special. So let's talk about summary of JavaScript. All these JavaScript libraries use modern technologies like HTML5, CSS3. It's a quick start because you have a lot of web platform developers available in your company. And it's web platform developers who are familiar with JavaScript at least, and HTML, so they can start, nothing special. Injections, I mean in this case that you can, at any time of your application process development, you can embed this UI style interface to your project easily. It doesn't require any special, you just create a new HTML file, include these JavaScript libraries, and you're ready. Create a JavaScript or HTML5 with jQuery, and you have this fancy UI interface which allows gestures. Widely used, I would say that Cincha have a lot of community. jQuery mobile, it's also have its previous jQuery community. No special environments, just familiar Chrome with their developer tools, Firebug for Firefox or Safari with their development tools. Nothing special, just what you always do. Disadvantages, it's because it's not a native app, because it's a HTML that will be rendered in your browser. Application speed, I would say that sometimes it's not in comparison with a native app. They have a really big issues with the lists when they have a lot of data to display in, and maybe to drag and drop, especially to drag and drop, because it's not easy to handle this is a click, or this is a long press, or this is a gesture. Platform dependable. You have to write many if-else blocks for each device because they're not single file. There is no any standard for this thing. Internet. In order to view this application, if you build with a jQuery extension, you have to have permanent internet connection to view the page. Nothing special. And no distribution channel. Means that you couldn't use Google Play, or you couldn't use Android iOS App Store to distribute your application in just a web. Another category, application framework. So I moved it a little bit at the beginning. Unless that it's create an application from the start. I mean that if you want to build an app and it will be a web that will be rendered on a browser, you should consider like using this application framework. They use a familiar language, programming language, like a JavaScript, based on high-tech technologies like Node.js. Also includes jQuery mobile, HTML5, CSS3. Recently, they have added PhoneGap support. So if you want a really native app, you can use a PhoneGap with the project name. So this is what I could mention. Advantages about these tools is that it's single place for business and presentation layer. So basically you're developing the same site and you can control UI interface as you do for Accenture or jQuery mobile, and also you control all your logic, like business logic, saving data in somewhere on MySQL database because it's a web application running on remote server. Cutting-edge technologies I mentioned above, it's HTML5, CSS3, Node.js, and stuff like that. It doesn't allow migrate. This is one of the disadvantages. You couldn't, if you want to use these tools in your application development, you have to rewrite your application from the scratch. Basically, you couldn't, like injection for Accenture jQuery mobile, you can embed, you can use them in the middle of the application development. Here, no. You have to start it from the beginning. 100% rely on development tools and community. Means that they have controlled all your process of building application, and if they stop supporting this project, you will basically have a dead end for your application. Online usage only is the same as a jQuery mobile and Accenture. You have to have permanent internet connection in order to get this application running. One limitation is that you have a browser window. I mean that if you're visiting an application in your browser, you have this address bar, or if you're looking at Android, you have this back, iOS devices, you have this back and forward buttons, also like bookmarks buttons, so you have to deal that your size of your screen is shrink a little bit for these toolbars that have web browsers. And of course, there is no distribution channels for this application. Going further, wrappers around web applications, like we continue increase this power of our tools. So this kind of tools help you to build really native applications that could run on native platforms like Android, iOS, and BlackBerry. What common about these things, about these tools, is that they all have the integrated development environment, except that PhoneGap is providing like a plugin for existing one. Single code development, so every that you are working on, UI and the business logic is in one place and you have like control for that. Native API support, yes, this kind of application because they are running on a native platform. Of course, they provide some proxy method to get the native API working, like camera, photo and video, and geolocation, and etc. So one of the presenters here is a Mousing. Interesting tool. I would say that this tool uses such technologies as JavaScript, HTML5, CSS3, and the main language you will be developing, it's not the main language, like additional language, it's C++. For me, it was a really big hell to work with this tool because I have to know a C++, I have to know JavaScript, build tools that compile this into native codes written in a Ruby. And so if I need to fix something, I have to know many technologies, and this is the most, like the hardest tool to work with for me. I didn't tell you. If you are a C++ developer, maybe it's the best choice. Another thing about this tool is that it doesn't support the latest native platforms. Let's say for Android they only support 2.3.3 when there is a 4.0 available. For iOS, it's also like a bad sign. They only support 4.3 when everybody already have 5.1.1. And this is like the most common cases for all these build tools. I will discuss it later. And for Windows Phone, to my surprise, they support a Windows Phone 7.0, 7.5. So it's one of the tools that could run on Windows Phone. This is how an IDE looks like. So basically it's a HTML and JavaScript, but in order to display the main script or main HTML file, you have to write a C function. And if you want your phone to vibrate, you have to write a C function to parse all your messages. And for me, it's like, why? It's a cross-platform tools. And I'm a web developer, I'm not a C++ developer. Maybe in earlier ages. So, another tool, PhoneGap. For those who present a lecture or presentation before me, I can skip or I can talk a little bit. So, by the time we reviewed it, it was 3 or 4 months ago, and we ran the project on a PhoneGap. We're faced with many problems. But right now it's growing up, it's getting larger and larger. And all the issues that we have with PhoneGap right now disappear. One of these was not very well working with the jQuery mobile, but presenter said that it's not their problem, it's our problem to build nice working UI interface. So this is JavaScript library. Yes, it's one of the tools that doesn't have their own development environment. They comes as a plugin for Xcode. Here it is. So on a presentation above, we build like a sample app. So you have to create www folder with index.html file, include PhoneGap. Right now it's a PhoneGap. So it was 3 months ago. And pretty all, you have a JavaScript, you have a web browser. Of course, there is a limitation. Limitations that on iOS, as I remember, you have like 25 seconds to run JavaScript. If it runs more than this time, it will be killed by the system. And you have a storage capacity for your objects in a memory, but for a normal and a simple, I would say, common used application, it's quite enough to use this. As the same, for users who never worked in an Xcode before, it could be a pain to work in an Xcode in native because it has really a lot of windows, a lot of buttons, and you don't know how to develop in such small window. But you have to get used to if you want. Another one, interesting tool, it's Mobile. The funny thing is that they use Ruby as a main programming languages to build an application. Of course, they use HTML5 and CSS3 because it's wrappers around web applications, but you create on your business logic on a Ruby, And I have a comment, Ruby is the power. So the Ruby developers available today and want to build applications on cross-platforms, welcome to use this tool because native language. This is the same IDE. They have all these, didn't have buttons to deploy. So Ruby and HTML, CSS3 has the same tools mentioned above. We come to summary, advantages. According to the previous groups that I talked about, they have support native APIs. So you can use a camera, accelerometer. If you don't extendable, move to another extendable tools. So if you don't have any support, let's say some special features of the device that are available only for this device, you could write your own, but in this case you have to know native SDK in order to write this plugin. Offline support, you can run this application on your phone without an internet, which is funny. Native application is basically the same icon on a dashboard and the same icon for Android to run application. Covered common cases, I mean, in this case I mean that all these provide you a web application which could handle all the common cases. Create element, delete element, display element, create a form for editing, and stuff like that. Only depends how like cross-mobile tools you want to have, because anytime you have to deal with the different browsers and different limitations on the platforms. Native SDK, all these tools require a native SDK is one of the problems that PhoneGap presenter mentioned, that in order to build on this application, you have to download Xcode, which is about 2 gigs, and you have to download Android SDK, which is about like 200 megabytes for each platform. Native distribution channels, now we have access to Google Play Market, now we have access to Apple Store, now we have access to the PhoneGap, they say like market maybe, where they provide their own application written by users. The same, I think, yeah, it's on another feature. And there is negative about these tools, they didn't provide you a native UI. So if one of your criteria to build application, it should fit in a native SDK guideline, it will be trouble for you. You could pretend and create HTML elements and style them to look like native UI elements. But remember, you have limited resources on your mobile devices, and your list with these thousands of rows wouldn't scroll. Challenges to go to live. I mean here that in order people to see your application, you have to come through approval process, let's say for iOS devices, approval process of Apple, then distribution on iTunes, and then it's spread everywhere. Unless, like for SageMaker, jQuery Mobile, you can embed it and it's web. It's accessible right now when you create it. High level of expertise about this, it's if something bad happened, and it's happened every time, you have to deal with a native SDK. And this could be a problem, especially, I would say, for a PhoneGap, like 4 months ago. We tried to do something and we have Xcode error. And without iOS developer, we couldn't even to fix this problem. Another thing is that all these tools depends on native SDK versions. I mean that 5.1.2 Apple released new firmware, so like version of platform, every tool will fail to run because maybe they changed something in a native SDK, how to build application, how to add some features. And all this kind of tool generate the native code in order to be built in application. So you have to be worried about it, and PhoneGap presenter said about it. But it's not so bad. It's not happen like every day, and you have to be prepared. Another one, the new one, is a transformers to the native code. It's not a transformers you know from a movie. It's a transformer, it's some kind of a tool that create a native app for a mobile platform, so it's the same mobile app. Transform platform language into a native code. Let's say you have JavaScript, and instead of creating a window with a CSS and HTML, they talk with a transformer which create a native object on this native SDK platform. And basically, if you say you want a button, this is a native button. It's not a CSS or HTML button. Integrated development environment, of course. You couldn't use a notepad for that. Having platform services, most of these provide like a user management services or push notification services for their application. Native API support. You run on a native SDK, you run on a native platform, you have access to all these native APIs. Antenna. I wouldn't say it's popular around the community. It's mostly enterprise level applications, and all this application working with the amount of data, save it to the list, edit, delete it, put it somewhere else. So this is like normal business application. And this business application will be running on an iPhone with a list native, like native UI lists that you have a scroll, have a drag and drop, and it's working. And the special thing about Antenna, they use drag and drop wizards. So basically this is like integrated development environment for this tool, and you drag, let's say you want, right now we have Android and iPhone, and then you can drag like tablet Android, and it will have this wizards that help you to do what you want to display on this list, what you want to edit, how you want to name this column, how you want to name this form field, and the result you will have like a native application running on a server. They have standalone server to manage all this application, to manage all your business objects somewhere outside the application, and as a result they have a conflict version mechanism. So when both users from different devices edit the same information, there will be an error on a web server belonging to Antenna and saying, okay, this object have been modified by this user and this user, what do you want to do? Keep this one or keep this one? So sometimes it's useful to have. They running on Android and iOS. The other tools that transform a JavaScript, I would say that I would return to Antenna. They use their own. It's not a JavaScript. It's not a basic. It's just some kind of simple Java to present their business logic, like to open a window, to go to this stage, like send a request. So, oops, down. Absolute Titanium. This is for me, this is my favorite tool that I use. This is JavaScript only. Recently, and again, 3 months ago it was only JavaScript. Recently they have announced support for HTML5 and named it like mobile web version. It's the same, so it turns into the same category as I talked before, PhoneGap, MouseSync. This is only one tool that generates native UI elements from a JavaScript site. So about this tool, they have about like 300,000 developer community, and they have their own marketplace where they sell or distribute their application built on this tool. Also have access to the all platforms features. It's like camera, geolocation, accelerometer, phone, video and audio. And at the end of the presentation, if we have a time, and we will have a time, I will show you the application written on this tool. This is how IDE looks like. What I can say about this IDE, it has a lot of buttons to run your code on a device, to run your code on emulator, to run your code on Android device or iOS device. Maybe one of the features, one of the limitations, it's only available for Android and iOS. It doesn't support Windows Phone 7 or Symbian. And so it has Eclipse. Everybody familiar with Eclipse, nothing special. Also, they have a debugging, like debugging view on an Eclipse where you can debug all your elements. But this limitation only you can debug on emulator, you couldn't debug on device. But I think with the same, and come to conclusions about it. It's the same. You run, you have access to the native API. You run on a native platform. Extendable tools. If something doesn't exist in a tool or in a platform that you are using above, you can write your own, but again, you have to write it in the native code. Offline support, of course. Native application, native UI. This is one of the tools that really produced a native UI. So let's say if we're talking about creating a tabs in your application, on Android, these tabs will be located at the bottom. On iOS devices, it will be located on the bottom. On Android devices, they will be located at the top. If you want to add new element, let's say to the list, you have for iPhone, and it's like if-else logic in your code, for an iPhone to add a button at the top left corner to open new window, and for Android, you have to add item to your menu. So you click menu button and you see add button. So this is like native UI works. And of course, these tools, because they're running on different platforms, becomes like really blocks of if-else. Android, do the same. If it's Apple, do the same. If it's handle devices, like if it's a tablet devices, it has a different size of screens, do this. Also, native distribution channels. Challenges to go live, the same. You have to approve, then go to iTunes Store and will be distributed. This is like a double dependency. You're dependent on a transform tools. You're dependent like transform libraries that translate your JavaScript or internal language into native code. So basically, if they stop doing this, you stop supporting application. And of course, it's the same, it's dependable on native SDKs. New version comes, you have to wait until they fix their builders to build the code. Comes to another, Adobe Air. I don't know how many of you familiar with the Flex and technologies. It's also from, as soon as Apple allows to run Adobe Air Player on your device, when it comes there and you have many Flex developers who are willing to draw their interfaces, why not? So create a native application for a mobile platforms. It's basically SWF bytecode, runs on native platform. On Android, they have a system installed, Adobe Air Player, so you don't include it in every application. For iOS, you don't have such ability, so they include this Adobe Air to every application that you compile. Native API support, I would say with some limitations. So sometimes, maybe I don't know, for some reason, on Apple devices, they couldn't get map working correctly, so they don't have a native UI element to show the map. They have to do HTML, embedded JavaScript, ask Google code, like ask Google to give me a position of this device and etc. But to make a power of Adobe Air, they have a stage 3D technology. It allows you to create OpenGL content. So basically, it allows you to create a really rich applications using OpenGL. So advantages: native APIs, extendable tools, offline support, native application. It means that, but native UI elements. And from our experience, we have created an application both on Adobe Air and Absolute Titanium. Interface looks really beautiful, but there is no performance. If you try to drag and drop, it slows down because they didn't use a accelerator, like OpenGL accelerator to do this. But still, you have a choice. Stage 3D support for games. It's a really beautiful platform to build if you decided to build a game. Native distribution channels, again, Google Play and Apple Store. not native UI as I mentioned above, challenges to go live with all that have created a native app has faced with this problem. Dependence on native SDK version. Again, new version comes, you have to adopt it. And recently they decided to stop providing like support for basic gaming, and Adobe moved forward to gaming direction to create application. So this is the most funny part you want to hear. It's a summary. So I wouldn't say that there is a tool that could help you to build one application and be satisfied running on different platforms. You always faced with some problems and some adjustments to each platforms. But this allows, as soon as all these technologies use the web application, all these tools, you can utilize it, so you can use about 80% of your resources available in the company. It means that any web service and application developer could have ability to write HTML, have ability to write JavaScript, and have some understanding of CSS3. Covers about 70% of all common application graphical user interface. So if you choose jQuery Mobile, you have ability to build any screen you want with CSS3 and HTML. If you choose Accelerated Titanium, you use any native UI element, list, table, tabs, forms, buttons, whatever. Covers about 60% of all common mobile application functionality. I mean that there is a lot of applications that only want to share information with you to display it in a list, have ability to add, delete, and edit. So if there is such simple application, you can use any tools that I have described in this presentation for this. Doesn't work, and the downside, it doesn't work with the platform-specific features from the out of the box, but you have ability to write, extensions to the tools and have these features. But in this case, you have to have native developer. No performance optimization for native UI elements. It doesn't consent transformers to the native UI because native UI have all these performance advantages, and doesn't really cover all mobile devices. Of course, PhoneGap can run on a mobile, like all current mobile platforms. But again, the time you spend fixing, I'm not talking about the PhoneGap. The PhoneGap will run. It shows you a screen, HTML, but after that, this is your problem. How you want to build your application run on an iPad, iPhone, Android, on like 100 devices of Android phones, and you have to check each what you have to do. So, and my experience about like my thoughts about mobile, cross-platform mobile tools is if you want to go to the application development sphere and you want to occupy some niche, and you basically should create a cross-platform cross-platform application using any of these tools and adapt it like to the most common usually devices, run in different platforms like Android, iOS, or maybe Symbian, BlackBerry, and see where the most users' feedbacks come from and where this application is used. And after that, you make a decision to hire a native developer and which extend your application and bring like a native UI, native ID, access, and etc. So, anything you want to ask about? Any questions? No? Yep.
You said you had something to show us.
Yeah, it will come after the questions. Or if you want, I can proceed and show you.
Yeah.
One question. You showed one of the compilers that you said was a light form of Java.
No. They have, it's not a light form of Java. I would say that they have it like antenna. I think you are, it's antenna. It's not a light form in Java. They use their internal language, and it's not a JavaScript. It's simple internal language that have like maybe 15 methods, show, do, like show this, go to this window, show this element, hide this element, and etc. So it's like really simple. Yeah, it's you have to open like a, if you want to some custom logic before something happens, like before Windows shows up, you want to hide some elements. Then you like edit row sources, create this simple like if this, let's say if this row has enabled field, then hide this checkbox or make it some like hide or moved, whatever. So they have like really small abilities. It allows you, I do not know, to write on. They allows you to write on a JavaScript for some special activities, on a Java, sorry, for Android. Any questions? Wow. Okay, now it's funny part. I will show you application. As I told you, it will be Absolrated Titanium. So it was a task to build it on a Absolrated Titanium and Adobe Air. Wow. So you see it's a native app, so nothing of the, I didn't open a web browser. That's the same as a phone guy. So you see we have a tab at the bottom. We have a add a new button at the top. We have a list that I can scroll. I can check. Basically the checkbox here is an image. There is no checkbox in iOS. Delete button. So you can create a new one. Oh, it was a sound, sorry. So you see we have a lot of items in our table and it scrolls smoothly. Yes, of course, it's native UI. If you run the same application written on Adobe Air, it will be really slow. You have access to the sound. We can start record. Something interesting about this functionality is that here we have only on iOS, I created like 3 buttons, start, record, and pause. On Android, they have a special activity to record the sound, and they open this nice UI view with a volumes row and the buttons play and stop. So we have this media, so we have access to our existing library. Okay, let's do this. Take a new one. Oops. Wow. Bad. Okay, so we have choose. Wow, it's really. Oh. So, come on, come on. Okay, so let's move, but I will be really careful with that. So we type, we have access to the camera. So we can record, use, and we have seen that we have add. Of course, in this case, what is happening? Come on. Yeah, maybe. It will work with this kind of peripherals and cables. They have a native support for a cable. Come on. Really? No. It didn't show up signal. Okay, so you get an idea. If you run the same code, so basically it's the same. And what I am proud of when creating this application, I know it's really simple, but I didn't write any native code at all. I was written only on JavaScript. And I'm really fancy about it. I don't want to deal with Objective-C or Java. And it allows you to build like common cases, which, and geolocation. We have check-in, we click check-in, we show the map. Wow, it's working. And nothing special. And it's user native, so it's gesture support, whatever. So this is what I want to show, and we move to another device, sorry. It will be how the Adobe Air working button small devices. Okay, now we have, so you see it's like, it's on iPhone, so we have a tabs at the bottom. Yes, it really fits for iPhone, but if you run it on an Android and the user get used to a native UI, he will be, I don't know, confused to see the tabs at the bottom. And of course, you could use like buttons menu, but all interfaces will be like on one screen. So we have created a lot of elements, and you see how it's really, it's on iPhone it's pretty good, but let's create another one. It's still very smooth, but if I decided to move, this will be really tough. So the same you see is how it's working. It's not the same that user get used on iPhone devices when they have this move, and it's smoothly and it's quickly, and you can move at the bottom of this table. So they have the same functionality to record the sound, to show photos and videos, nothing. So this is what I want to show you as an example of cross-platform tools. One is Accelerated Titanium, and another one is the same application that I showed you before. It's running on iPhone. The same, it has lists, tabs, and it has adjustment to the screen, large screen and small screen. More questions? No. Okay. So I'm glad that you come here. I think it was interesting for you. If you have any questions, we have enabled on the first floor. Come in and we have good talk. Thank you.